President Trump tonight has paused a decision to roll back Obama-era regulations banning hunters from bringing trophies from elephants killed in Zimbabwe and Zambia into this country. The president wrote on Twitter, quote, "Put big game trophy decision on hold until such time as I review all conservation facts. Understudy for years. Will update soon with Secretary Zinke. Thank you." Also germane to this discussion, the fact that the president's sons, Eric and Don Jr., are big game hunters. Don Jr. especially has posted a slew of photos with former wild animals, including one where he's just holding a tail in case we miss the point. Obviously, we have no idea if their hobby had any bearing on this ruling, but we wanted to talk about this for a second night, and joining us to do that, Jeff Corwin, wildlife biologist, conservationist, and Emmy-winning TV host of Ocean Treks. Jeff, what do you make of this issue? It's hard to know what to make of what's going on here.
Well, here's the story. The backstory of Africa is that of the 54 countries in Africa today, only 6 of them allow hunting, big game commercial hunting. And the reason for that is the complexities, the controversies, the graft that comes with this industry that has happened throughout Africa, and the great challenge of regional populations, of locals that live in these countries, do not have access to these resources, particularly to hunt them as big game hunters, yet rich, wealthy people of privilege from Europe and the United States can go to these countries and hunt these animals and take these resources back as trophies. In the United States, Brian, we have a long history of a partnership between hunting, land management, and conservation based in regulation, enforcement, and in science. But in countries like Zimbabwe, which recently just underwent a potential military coup with President Mugabe recently under house arrest, where is the stability there, Brian, to ensure that the checks and balances are in place to manage this lethal activity?
The theory works out. There's a group in the United States, Ducks Unlimited. It's duck hunters who are also making sure that there will be ducks for everyone and a healthy duck population in the United States. But to your point, in the middle of a coup, do we really think, as a secretarial matter, that permits are going to get paid and delivered to the right people in Zimbabwe to care for the elephant population when their longtime leader just got carted off by the military?
Exactly, Brian. You hit the nail on the head. Look at a group like Ducks Unlimited. Yes, at the core of their interests are sportsmen and women who like to go out and hunt ducks. But through that activity, they raise millions and millions of dollars. Hunters in the United States raise over $34 billion every year, and a portion of that will go to habitat reclamation, species conservation. Ducks Unlimited has helped to lock up millions of acres of wetland habitat. Now look at Zambia, which now, up to recently, was being favored as opening up its status for the importation of these elephant trophies. Zambia, in a very short period of time, just over 30 years, the population of elephants has dropped from 200,000 animals to 21,000 animals. In Africa, at the turn of the century, Brian, there was more than 1,200,000 lions. Today, only 20,000 remain. I bring this up because unlike a white-tailed deer, which is hunted recreationally in the United States, has a very robust population. When you're an endangered species, when there's only 5,000 black rhino left, only 20,000 white rhino left, a handful of cheetahs spread out throughout Africa, they are too precious and too vulnerable to be exploited for something such as big game hunting. The idea that conservation plays a role in this, if you want to protect these species, donate the money, protect habitat, be a part of the conservation solution.
Be a part of the solution. Jeff, thank you. Some of this is just too difficult to think about if you're an animal lover, as we both are. We've had no shortage of colorful figures in all of this, and I'm going to name another one. Rob Goldstone, who came across as kind of a Zelig Jackie Gleason character in this when he first surfaced. He's ready to come to the U.S. and talk to Mueller. What might he know, and remind our audience his slice of this story, his role in this story thus far?
Yes, Brian, and this is great reporting by our colleague Robert Windrum, who learned that Rob Goldstone, who is a music promoter who was the go-between between the Agalarov family, these Russian oligarchs, and Donald Trump Jr. in setting up that 2016 Trump Tower meeting. Goldstone was the guy who wrote those very suggestive emails saying that the Russian government is helping your father's campaign, and this lawyer has information from the Crown Prosecutor of Russia. Well, there actually is no Crown Prosecutor, but there's a federal prosecutor, and those emails, set in motion this chain of events where we're all scrutinizing this meeting and wondering what exactly was provided, and there's been a lot of information since then. But what Rob Goldstone may know that very few others know is exactly how this was set up, what was said that we're not seeing in the emails, what was said over the phone as these intermediaries were talking to each other, and what did the Trump team understand about what was being promised in that meeting. And so we believe he's going to tell his story to Mueller and the grand jury.
This was our president on Twitter last night. Quote, "The Al Frankenstein picture is really bad, speaks 1,000 words. Where do his hands go in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 while she sleeps?" He has decided to go after Democratic Senator Al Franken of Minnesota, who is accused of forcibly kissing a woman in 2006 and then taking this photograph while she slept. Franken has apologized publicly, directly to his accuser in a letter, and called for a Senate Ethics Committee investigation into his own behavior, though his political survival here is hardly guaranteed. The president is, of course, well aware of the consequences of his own actions and words. He's been silent on the Republican Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore's accusers. Moore has said he has never engaged in sexual misconduct. And the president had to know that entering the fray would mean his own accusers would likely get another airing. And with this compilation, as put together by our colleagues at All In, here they are again.
It was at that time where he turned to me and embraced me and gave me a kiss on the lips. And I remember being shocked, and because I would have just thought to shake somebody's hand.
When we entered the room, he grabbed each of us tightly in a hug and kissed each one of us without asking permission.
I feel the little, this little grab. It's like, you're feeling like a little cheek lift almost. And I stand up really tall. I'm shocked in a moment, and I turn around and I look at him, and he doesn't look at me. He doesn't want to make eye contact with me.
He then walked up to me and reached his right arm and grabbed my right arm. Then his hand touched the right inside of my breast.
He then grabbed my shoulder and began kissing me again very aggressively and placed his hand on my breast. I pushed his chest to put space between us, and I said, "Come on, man, get real." He repeated my words back to me, "Get real," as he began thrusting his genitals.
The person on my right, who, unbeknownst to me at that time, was Donald Trump, put their hand up my skirt. He did touch my vagina through my underwear. Absolutely.
Somehow or another, the armrest in the seat disappeared, and it was a real shock when all of a sudden his hands were all over me. It's when he started putting his hand up my skirt, and that was it.
He pushed me up against the wall and had his hands all over me and tried to get up my dress again. And I had to physically say, "What are you doing? Stop it." It was a shocking thing to have him do this.
I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the.
So for the record, there it is. And for the record as well, the president has denied all those women's accounts. He said they were all fabricated. He also said he'd be suing them after the campaign, but has not. Today, his White House spokeswoman laid out what it views as the difference between accusations made about Trump and Al Franken.
If it's fair to investigate Al Franken and the allegation made by his accuser, is it also fair to investigate this president and the allegations of sexual misconduct made against him by more than a dozen women?
Look, I think that this was covered pretty extensively during the campaign. We addressed that then. The American people, I think, spoke very loud and clear when they elected this president.
But how is this different?
I think in one case specifically, Senator Franken has admitted wrongdoing and the president hasn't. I think that's a very clear distinction.
Is this an uncomfortable conversation about these sexual allegations for this White House, be it Al Franken or be it Roy Moore?
I think it's an uncomfortable conversation for the country.
Here with us to talk about all of it and extend that uncomfortable conversation, Philip Bump, national correspondent for The Washington Post, Indira Lakshmanan, columnist for The Boston Globe and chair of the Journalism Ethics Bureau at the Poynter Institute, and Christina Bellantoni, assistant managing editor of politics for the Los Angeles Times. Welcome to you all. Indira, did the president, was he looking for distraction by going after Franken on Twitter last night?
I think he couldn't resist. I mean, this is one of his political rivals who has not been shy about speaking out against the president and condemning him. And so it was just a target that the president couldn't avoid. What I find really disturbing about the tweet is this Frankenstein tweet. You know, he loves to call people, whether it's Little Rocket Man or Frankenstein, to make, you know, jokes about people. But by even raising the idea of what happened in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, it's disgusting. I mean, it's pulling something else into our minds. We don't know whether it happened or whether it didn't happen. It's really gross, and I don't know why you would make the situation even worse. The other question is, people who live in glass houses really shouldn't be throwing stones, and I think that's what was so strong about your opening piece there, showing that there are more than a dozen women who spoke out about the president during the campaign and who now feel in the post-Weinstein era, where this dam has broken and people are speaking out so much that they were never heard back then. So the day of reckoning may still be coming for the president.
Philip, we aired those accusations because it's been a while since we heard a lot of them, and because right now, given the national conversation we're having, they're germane. I know you analyzed the president's reactions to those accusers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's been categorical essentially from the first day they started coming out, which people will remember was after the Access Hollywood tape. He was asked during a presidential debate, well, have you actually behaved in this way that you described? And he said he hadn't. That was the point at which a lot of these women started to come forward. And he's been categorical ever since, saying, no, this is all untrue. It's all untrue to a person. He has never said, yes, I did do this to person X. And that's been repeated. It was repeated last month by him. It was repeated earlier this month by his spokesperson, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And I think that what we heard her say today is really the most revealing thing they've said about this, which is that they understand that politically speaking, as long as they maintain that air of doubt, he can keep denying it, and his supporters will give him that presumption of doubt for as long as he keeps denying it. As soon as they admit that it happens, if he were to take that stand, then that whole house of cards falls apart.
Christina, is the president going to be able to have this vow of silence on Roy Moore all the way up to and including Election Day?
I mean, I'm not sure about that. You never know what the president is going to say, when he's going to say it, or if it's going to appear on Twitter. I think these are two very distinctive issues, though. You have to think about, you know, sexual assault, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct is one conversation. The political maneuvering here that the White House is doing, that national Republicans are doing, enjoying that it is a Democrat of such prominence, someone that, you know, ended up winning his seat in a very long, costly, and contentious recount in 2008. You know, they don't like Al Franken. They have not liked Al Franken. Before he was a senator, he wrote a book calling a bunch of conservative media liars. And so in some ways, there's a little bit of political delight in this. But it is also important to look, we're not just talking about, you know, one senator in Congress. We had a member of Congress testify this week that there is a Republican and a Democrat serving in Congress who has engaged in very inappropriate behavior with people that work on Capitol Hill. And we don't know who those people are at this moment. And I don't believe that that's Senator Al Franken. That's not who she was talking about. So this is a bigger picture cultural issue about what type of behavior we're seeing out of elected officials, celebrities in the news, people that are held up to a different standard. We know that people have made accusations against George H.W. Bush and things that he did while he was posing for pictures with women. So it's a bigger picture issue. And so it's sort of the political part of it. The Roy Moore situation, establishment Republicans are against him. The Roy Moore faction is enjoying that. They want to be at war with establishment Republicans. And so for President Trump to kind of take a step back, he's in some ways straddling both sides of that. I can't predict if he's going to weigh in or not, but it's a long time until that election in Alabama.
Day 302 of the Trump administration brings new indications that Jared Kushner, the president's senior advisor and son-in-law, arguably the closest man to the president in the West Wing, appears to have been telling less than the whole truth when it comes to the campaign's contacts with Russian officials. Settle in, this is involved. New reporting tonight from two of our own, Ken Dilanian and Carol Lee of NBC News. It says Kushner did not reveal an attempt to reach out to the Trump campaign from a Russian banker who is close to President Vladimir Putin and who has been accused of having ties to organized crime. This comes just one day after the top Democrat and Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee sent Kushner a letter saying that he had failed to turn over documents to the committee requested last month. Among those missing documents, communications concerning a Russian backdoor overture and dinner invite. That'll get your attention. NBC News reports that the overture and invite relate to a series of emails from the aforementioned Russian banker, fellow by the name of Alexander Torshin, who wanted then-candidate Donald Trump to attend an event on the sidelines of the NRA convention May 2016. Our report goes on, quote, the email also suggests Torshin was seeking to meet with a high-level Trump campaign official during the convention and that he may have had a message for Trump from Putin, sources said. Jared Kushner turned down this request, and tonight his lawyer, Abbe Lowell, in a letter to Senate Judiciary, included Kushner's response at the time. Forgive me. Pass on this. A lot of people come claiming to carry messages. Very few we were able to verify. For now, I think we decline such meetings. Most likely, these people then go back home and claim they have special access to gain importance for themselves. Be careful. But Bloomberg News reported earlier this year that Alexander Torshin did meet with Donald Trump Jr. during a private dinner on the sidelines of the aforementioned NRA convention in Louisville. Bloomberg also reported a source familiar with that encounter says Trump Jr. doesn't recall meeting Torshin. So far, the White House has not responded to any of tonight's reporting. But before we break all this down, here is Jared Kushner from this summer. This came after he met with Senate investigators. And remember, as you watch this, he raised eyebrows for speaking from a lectern with the White House seal on the front and standing in front of the West Wing.
The record and documents I have voluntarily provided will show that all of my actions were proper and occurred in the normal course of events of a very unique campaign. I did not collude with Russia, nor do I know of anyone else in the campaign who did so. I had no improper contacts, and I have been fully transparent in providing all requested information.
Let us bring in our leadoff panel for a Friday night. Ken Dilanian, NBC News intelligence and national security reporter, as we mentioned, one of the bylines on our lead story tonight. Carrie Cordero is back with us, former senior associate general counsel for the Director of National Intelligence, the DNI, who is these days at Georgetown Law, and Eli Stokols is back with us as well. White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal and an MSNBC political analyst. Okay, Mr. Dilanian, thanks to you, we have another Russian name to throw on the pile and now get forced to memorize. Break this down for us, and what is being alleged here?
Brian, I think you did a terrific job of laying it out for us. And what I think the significance of this is really twofold. One, it's another example of Jared Kushner being accused of failing to disclose, of failing to be forthright about his Russian contacts. Recall that he had to amend his financial disclosure forms to disclose contacts that he initially left off, including that famous June 2016 Trump Tower meeting. Well, now he's being admonished for failing to turn over these documents that show an approach by Alexander Torshin seeking a high-level meeting. And his lawyer responds, well, we rejected the approach, so that's exculpatory. But still, congressional investigators are wondering, why didn't you come clean about it in the first place? But then secondly, it's the substance of this, as you well laid out. Yes, Torshin didn't get the meeting with Kushner, but he got a meeting, according to him, with Donald Trump Jr. And very little is known, actually, Brian, about the circumstances of how that meeting came to be, what was said. I'm told that congressional investigators are very interested in it. But bottom line, it's another high-level Russian with ties to Vladimir Putin, who was circling around this campaign, seeking a high-level meeting, proposing a meeting between Trump and Putin, another thing that is causing congressional investigators and presumably Robert Mueller to take a hard look.
So, Carrie Cordero, is it because there have been so many misses and so many attempts to go back and correct the record and so many deletions that this doesn't break as more exculpatory or good news for the client here, in this case, Jared Kushner?
Well, so the one response that he had, I mean, certainly that's in his favor a little bit, that he rejected that particular overture, at least according to that one email that's been reported. But it is a problem that not only Kushner, but we saw this with Attorney General Sessions earlier in the week, that they constantly are having to correct the record in terms of the information they are providing to congressional investigators at least. And yet we know also that another member of the Trump campaign, Papadopoulos, has been charged with lying to federal investigators. So this entire group, they have a truth-telling problem, or a problem at the very least of being forthcoming. And in that summer press conference that Jared Kushner had, he specifically said, I had no improper contacts. And so that does raise the question as to, did he know at the time this summer when he made that statement that others in the campaign may have?
Eli Stokols, a couple questions for you. Number one, this is going to seem superficial, but when Jared Kushner made those remarks, people in the White House advance community, in the media community, even in the White House staff, were surprised because he gave himself the imprimatur of the White House with the lectern, with the backdrop, with the Marine Guard opening the door. I remember contemporaneously people that night saying, be sure what you say here is correct.
Right, and that is sort of something we've seen from this White House, from a number of people, just worrying about that moment, declaring that everything is fine, no collusion. We heard Sessions testify months ago, say the same thing. I think Kerry is exactly right to draw that line from Sessions to Kushner and to others in this administration who have emphatically denied any collusion, any contact, and then there's been reports of a lot of contact, and they suddenly remember. Sessions said the other day it was a chaotic campaign. The clip you played of Jared Kushner standing in front of the White House, he said, during a unique campaign, I forget the verbiage exactly, but it was the same thing. There's this idea that, well, it was a little crazy. You can't expect us to remember everything. And that's just not good enough, I don't think, for Bob Mueller.
And let me borrow a page from our mutual friend, Nicole Wallace. Here we are talking about whether a given memo or an email is exculpatory, good news, or bad for Jared Kushner. Nicole always comes back, as a White House veteran herself, I didn't know this many Russians lived in the United States. We're swimming in Russians.
Well, and that's why they probably, I mean, what Abby Lowell said in the letter today that we've all reported now is, look, there were a bunch of people, a bunch of names on this list. This was before there was any idea that Russia was going to be. I mean, this whole investigation is about Russia. So it's just a little fatuous to sit there and say, oh, we didn't really think this was relevant to the investigation. It just doesn't, it fits a pattern of sort of just not, I wouldn't call it obstruction, but just not being fully forthcoming. And that's why Kushner got a letter this week saying, do we have all the things? Because if you're not sending us all the things that we've subpoenaed, you're going to be in trouble.